on JTV. We're here in Saratoga Springs, New York. You probably recognize this building from a photo gallery on uBloom. That's right, today we're here at Christopher Grigas' store in Bloom at Schuyler Pond. And I think in Bloom's right back there. So we're going to get started with today's project. So Chris, when I told you I was coming, I said, I want you to make something, because now one of the things that everybody loves on uBloom, I mean, this is the guy that you're seeing the most gorgeous flower arrangements from. This is the guy that is writing the articles. This is the guy that has this cool store. So I wanted everybody to see something that you would make, and so you picked this out for us today.
Right.
So
exactly. So
tell us a little bit about what we're going to make.
I wanted to make a shelter design, and basically what the concept behind it is that you have these arrangements that it can be floral or non-floral, but the idea is that there's something that's sort of sheltering or protecting the arrangement itself. So what I think is interesting about that is you look at the arrangement from a distance and you see something beautiful and textured, but when you get really close to it, you realize that there's something deeper, and I love that sort of layering effect. It's just really interesting, and
okay.
It's inspiring as far as floral design.
You think about your stuff.
Definitely.
So much. And
I do.
I think that that's really key as to when we create an arrangement, we want to think about it. Sometimes we're just throwing flower arrangements together, not a good thing for us. We want to make sure that we're thinking about it. So
exactly.
Okay.
So,
it's a big container.
right. It is a big container, and I love this container. It's really cool. It's like this sort of bronzy thing. I don't even know what to describe it as.
Metal.
But it's metal. It's a little corroded, which I think is more fun because it gives it an old look. And it is bigger, which, you know, when the arrangement is done, you will be able to kind of visualize that you can make this smaller for like a regular home.
Sure.
I mean, this is something that you might make for a flower show or an event or something that's larger scale.
An event, I love that.
Right,
Perfect.
So what I want to do is I'll start with, I'm just going to line the container because we don't want to ruin it.
Okay.
I'm going to put I use cellophane a lot of times that we use to wrap flowers, but you could use, like if you had the container and it had a liner that went with it, a lot of times they're form-fitted.
Right.
Or you can do the silicone. I know people have done that with certain containers.
Okay, cool.
So you can do that. So I'm going to take this and sort of fit it to about the right size so that I know when I drop the foam that's been soaked in, everything will kind of gather, and then I can just trim off the edges so that it doesn't look messy. All right, so I'm going to drop one block in the bottom.
Okay.
And make sure it fits to the bottom pretty well.
Now, you're using aquafoam today?
I am using aquafoam, and I mean anything Oasis aquafoam, whatever it is, just make sure that it's soaked properly. Don't ever push it underwater.
We were talking about that earlier. Yeah, me too. How much of a hurry can you be in that you don't have 27 seconds?
So I'm going to take that block that's been placed. I'm going to take two more blocks and kind of eye the measurement, and it pretty much is correct as far as the size goes. But I am going to cut the edge. The corners,
tapering.
Right, the tapering, I don't want that to crush the foam because crushed foam just doesn't hold water, and it's much more dense, so it's going to end up hindering the life of flowers.
Very good point again. Do not throw your boxes of foam.
Right.
Because and sometimes in a wholesale house you'll see them kick it off the balcony and land on the floor. Wherever that hits on that surface, it compresses that.
So basically just place this in here, makes it relatively heavy, so you could probably do something even really tall in here and it wouldn't topple over.
Sure.
But what I'm going to do now is just take my little clipper and clean up the edge so I don't have all this hideous plastic hanging out. And it doesn't have to be perfect because you'll clean it up later once you have all the flowers sort of placed. Sure. And they'll disguise a lot of the mess that I make. All right, so we have this place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create kind of a textured autumn, like a harvesty, woodsy, botanical looking kind of creation in the middle that is going to almost spill over to the edge. Okay. And then I'm going to add things like bark and moss in this. And then the creation of the armature, or the sheltering is going to happen with some other botanical things that I kind of have around. So let me start with the arrangement itself. And I think I will start with some beautiful antique hydrangea. Sorry.
Those are gorgeous.
Yeah. Pretty amazing color.
Gorgeous.
And texture. So I'm just going to cut a nice big chunk here. And this this is great because it's in little sections. So you can kind of gauge how much you're going to need for an arrangement as big as this is. Because what I'm going to do is use the hydrangea as my base and then work around the hydrangea with all the other textures and flowers, exactly.
Perfect.
So for this one I have 5 pieces. That's, this one hydrangea head might be enough to fill this entire arrangement for what it needs to do. So I'm just going to place those in here. And actually I might break these down a little bit smaller.
Okay, so now tell me, self-taught or school?
Schooled. I have my bachelor's in horticulture and floral design.
That's why you know all the names.
That's why I know all the names.
That's why you know all the names.
I did go to college. So I'm just going to make this sort of not necessarily evenly distributed, but in little clusters, because I find that if I do things in little perfect little sections, it looks like polka dots, which looks very contrived, and I'm not into that. I want something that looks natural, like the forest floor. When leaves fall, they don't fall perfect. They fall in all different ways. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to actually do like a floral faux pas. I'm going to put silly carnations in something that I think is going to be like a high style arrangement, but the way that I use them is I'm going to tuck them deep. And it's basically going to be disguised, but it's going to be like an undertone of color. Are
you doing this for me because carnations are one of my favorite flowers?
I used to be a carnation snob, and I've gotten over myself. I'm so ready to move on.
I'm so happy about that.
I'm ready to move on.
You're the recovering carnation
Exactly. So I'm going to take these nice fluffy orange, they're lighter orange, and I'm going to tuck them in kind of like near the hydrangea and maybe even a little within the hydrangea so that you have this interesting sort of texture and color, and that with that pink, mauve, green, and then a little bit of orange kind of in there. I love orange and pink together. It's one of my favorite combinations. So when I do see it, I'm like, that somebody is on my side. That person knows what they're doing to me. Oh, and then the Brasilia, which is amazing, and that's the next thing I'm going to use. Another excellent texture. I think this stuff should be in every arrangement in the world. So I'm going to use this, and don't forget that the little sort of ferny things that are at the base, they can be used just as well. And I find that instead of peppering the arrangement with it, do them in little groups because it's more effective as far as like all these little things being clustered. I love the way this stuff looks when it's in a little section, almost like a vegetative arrangement from Europe. You get that a grouped thing that almost looks like it's growing right out of the arrangement. I just think it's the best. And I'm going to put these little Brasilia pot right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to scented geranium, which is, I just can't even talk about it. It's so great.
And this is so beautiful too.
It's locally grown. It smells like, well, besides heavenly, it smells like peppermint, and it's just insanely nice. Fresh, and it's really sturdy. It's got this really cool, natural, dark veination in the center.
Yeah.
Totally great. And that's another cool thing about adding sort of like an herbal. I mean, you could do this with rosemary, you could do it with sage or whatever, but there are a lot of different things you can add to an arrangement to give it a little fragrance that not necessarily is floral or jasmine or gardenias. It could be peppermint or it can be sage. And when you go up to an arrangement and they go, oh, it smells so good, but they can't identify what it is. I love when I can like stump the people, the world. It's kind of fun for me. So I'm just going to add a few of these nice leaves and little snippets from the top.
I noticed that you're putting them in clusters too,
Right.
and the clusters look very vegetative.
Right, exactly. So it's like the little rosette idea that this thing is grown from the ground. Treating this as if it was the ground. All right. Keep adding a few more. I'm just probably going to put like one full stem in here. And just, I always want it to be where the arrangement, when you're putting these things in, try not to be, don't, let your mind go. Just start adding, because I find that when you think too hard, in the end, you look at it and you go, oh, it looks like a stiff, board of flowers. It doesn't look, if that's your goal, to make something that look perfectly manicured, that's your goal. But if you're trying to make something that's a little less and more freeform, this is the way to go. I love it.
Gotcha.
I'm just adding a little bit more of the Cape mix here, the pink heather. And I like the Cape mix You know, a lot of times we see the pink heather, and it's that perfect, you know, little form, that alpine look.
Right.
I love the Cape Mix because it's a little ratty, and it looks, you know, kind of disheveled and natural. And again, this goes with this whole look, is this, you know, the combination of just lots of textures and not so flowery.
Right.
So it's just more botanical. I just think it's more appealing.
Yeah.
It's just me talking now. So I'm going to just a little bit more over on this side, and then
All
I'm
right.
going to add some of the Dusty Miller, which is to die for. I just love this fat leaf Dusty Miller. It is
And is this
so beautiful.
local grower again then
Local,
too?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent stuff, and just it's such a different foliage. A lot of people don't realize that, you know, you can put silver in an arrangement without adding, you know, ting ting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these, and I came up with this kind of funny thing, and I showed Erin the other day, and thought she was going to jump out of her seat. But I love the silver foliage of the lower part of the, but you can actually wipe off the top part silver, and so you have a double toned green and then silver at the same time in an arrangement. And a lot of people don't know that this works, and I think I might have invented that.
Okay, we'll credit you with it.
Okay, good. We just have to like check
you.
the references or whatever.
Hey, you know what? I say the first person that goes out with it is the person who gets it.
Okay, good. So what's neat is it's got this really fuzzy, pretty texture when it's just grown, but a lot of times it gets these little damages, and they don't look that great in arrangements, especially if you're doing a wedding bouquet. But they love the silver. So what I do is I'll take the two leaves and I'll put them face to face or back to back or whatever, and just kind of do that combination so that you get the green and the silver in one section. And I've seen this in a couple arrangements that I've done lately, and I just thought, okay, that's my new thing. Gonna have to steal that from myself.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna roll this stuff right off of it. You know, be forceful, but a little gentle, because you don't want to tear the leaf, obviously.
Right.
But if you can get rid of the fuzz on the top, and some people might want to leave it. I mean, I certainly love the entire leaf, but with certain looks, I just want to show something different. And people might not, even a horticulture person might look at this and not be able to identify it. And you know, me and I love to stump the people. So
there you go.
So we'll add another one of these down here. And another thing with the Dusty Miller, a lot of times they're very soft stemmed. So you can always pick these if you wanted to, if the stems are soft, and just by wire wrapping, and then make sure it goes all the way down to the pick. You can tuck this maybe in here. Make sure that the bottom of the stem goes into the foam at least a little bit. I'll do one more. And you can do this so fast. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, there's so much work doing picks and wiring and all that, but when it comes down to it, the mechanics are what make the arrangement the best thing, you know, good, because if you don't do good mechanics, your arrangement will not last.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to tuck one more in here. I just love that, like, little shine on there. It's the only glossy thing in the entire arrangement.
I'm stealing it.
Cool.
I'm stealing that idea. It's going in my next show.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, so I'm going to take some leucadendron, which is really cool. This is another Safari Sunset, but the yellow variety. And I'm going to take a few of these and just shorten them a little bit. And see how the carnations are kind of like, now they're sort of getting disguised, and you know, the more stuff I add, the more you're not going to see them, which, you know, they're a pretty color and everything, and that's all I want from them is the color and the texture. I don't want them to stand out as a single flower. I don't want anything to stand out as a single flower in this arrangement. All right, now I'm going to take this Brunia, which is one of my favorite things in the whole world.
Silver balls.
Silver. It's just, whoever thought there'd be silver in
I know.
the floral world, but there it is. And you can kind of mix and match with the silver of the Dusty Miller, because you know, these kind of go together, but they're not. They're totally different textures. So when you put them next to each other, there's a juxtapose, but there's a cohesiveness at the same time, which I think is awesome. So we just do a little tuck in here, and another piece here, and you can, you know, kind of dig these down deep. And I love, like, you have Brunia, Brasilia, you know, all these textures that kind of go together, but it's the shape that makes those look good together, and then the silver that makes these look good together. So you have all these neat combinations that are just about texture. I mean, there's really not a lot of flowery stuff in this, but it's just the kind of arrangement that I want everybody to understand and appreciate the way that they can if they just like expand their mind a little bit beyond, you know. Now what I want to do is take some little chunks of bark that I found. I actually went and found a tree
Okay.
that had fallen in the forest, and I just broke the big chunk of the bark off and then dried it so it wasn't sitting there soaking wet. And there's like cool little moss growing on it and
I saw
whatever.
that, yeah, it's wonderful.
So I'm just going to take a few little chunks of this and add it to the arrangement in between the pieces of floral and textures and all those goodies. And kind of disguising the edges so it doesn't look like you just dropped bark, like a mulch on top of your arrangement.
Okay.
There we go, there. And this is where you really get to see what I was trying to describe in the beginning was when you're looking at this arrangement, you see layers and layers, and the more you look at it, the more things you see in it. And in the beginning, you might look at it and go, oh, that's really beautiful. Ta-da. But then when you really get your hands in there and start peeking at every little thing, I mean, you might count 20 different botanicals in the thing.
Right. And it draws you in with having that different layer down inside there.
And I'm going to take the...
I love that red in there. It's a real punch.
Right. It's
really
just enough
does.
color to give you something without being distracting.
Yeah.
I mean, because it goes with everything. I'm going to take a little bit of this Lycopodium club moss, which is cultivated, and I'm going to tuck it in mostly around the edges because I want to give this a little bit of a little bit more bounce. Like I like movement in an arrangement, and if the arrangement tends to be stiff, it just looks contrived, and that's just not the look we're going for here. So I'm going to tuck a few of these in, and it's so nice because it gives you such a real idea of life. I mean, it literally is bouncing and it's moving, and if it was windy in here, it would move, and that's what I think is really great about the product.
Balance.
Fizzy.
Yeah.
And I have these little scabiosa pods that look like soccer balls.
Yep.
They're just so neat, and I just used these in a wedding bouquet yesterday. That was so cool.
That was the one that you posted on Facebook.
I did.
And I made a comment about it because it was absolutely gorgeous.
It was a nice one, and the girl, I never met the girl. She emailed me a few photos of stuff that she liked, and said, "I'm getting married on Saturday or Sunday, and can you create something and I'll pick it up?" And you always biting your nails, thinking, "Oh my gosh, what if she shows up and she hates what I do?" But you take these photos that they send you and you kind of channel them, and you just make something that's going to work.
Right.
Be just but created for her. I mean, I made it for her. It wasn't a mimic of what she sent me or anything. That was interesting, and I liked the arrangement a lot. It was very cool.
Colors were incredible.
Very botanical.
Was
And,
beautiful.
yeah. So I'm just adding these little guys here. So there's those little guys, and then I have some millet that is locally grown and is just insanely beautiful. In nature, you see groupings of this, clusters. You would never see one of these standing in the middle of a field. So I always
like it does in
group
roses.
them, right, exactly. So I would always group them in like maybe 3s or 5s, in odd numbers always if you can, if you can. Shorter little sections together, and I try to, when you do these little things, just be gentle when you're adding, but be forceful enough where everything goes in together, and it's Now I want to do a little bit of this chocolate cosmos, which I'm practically going to faint when I saw it come in this morning because it's locally grown. It is one of the most amazing flowers in the entire world.
We were looking at chocolate cosmos again at the New York Flower Market, and I was interested by it because, again, I love the way that it looks and the way that it's bundled, but you might have 2 or 3 of the blossoms that aren't perfect in it, and then so you're going to buy 5 or 6 or 8 bunches. And there's a couple that are broken, and they're a very light-stemmed flower too. So locally grown is kind of a solution for that.
Right, and it's a little different because it's really rigid. I mean, the stems are rigid, and when you get it shipped, it's a little weak. Normally, when I get it shipped from like Holland or somewhere, it will be bent first of all, and you have to hydrate it like crazy, and then when you're done, you go, 5 of them are good out of 25. These, there are 20 and they're perfect, and some of them are buds, some of them are fully open.
They are. They're like the little tiny ones and the bigger ones.
And that's something else. When it comes to like the botanical thing, I love stages of life in floral. Even if it's when you take one of these and you might pluck all of the petals off because they're not quite right, that little pod in the middle is interesting to me. I mean, it has a horticultural aspect that you're not going to get from anything else.
Okay.
So I'm going to cut these a little shorter and just tuck them in a little here.
And that it also mimics the color of your oak leaves.
Right. So it's got that sort of chocolatey red combination that is just, it's so intriguing. I mean, you want to know what that little thing is in there. And I'm going to do that at a couple levels so that we have a little bit more height and variance with this part. This one a little low down next to it. Like that. I'm just going to put 6 in the whole arrangement because they are, I mean, they're not a cheap flower.
Right.
But
right.
the impact you get from something as small as this is totally worth the money, I think. Okay, so I feel like the arrangement is pretty complete. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tuck in a little bit of moss into empty spaces, and then the sheltering part I'm going to do last, and that's going to come with some crocosmia pods and some steel grass and the little crispidia. What the idea of this is that the crocosmia is going to create a barrier that you know, whether it's the elements or something, you know, sort of out there, but you're protecting the life of the flowers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these crocosmia and I'm going to poke them into the oasis where there are slight little gaps, if I can. And we're going to go all the way around. I'm going all the way around our arrangement with the crocosmia pods. And this doesn't have to be this kind of thing that is massive and a wall. You can do it very sparsely and do it just elegantly, you know, with the natural shapes of the flowers and make sure that they are going in the direction that they would grow.
Sure. Or
using them to that advantage at least, not necessarily growing. Okay, so here we have the basic idea of the sheltering, where we have the big arrangement in the middle. The sheltering is the crocosmia coming up and growing around and almost creating like a wall. Now what I want to do is take, I have ideas that I want to do, but who knows where I'm going to go with this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I have this birch that I've curved it. What I've done is I've taken it fresh and I rolled it into a loop and put it into a cylinder vase. And over a couple days it dries like this, so it doesn't break when you bend it. And what I'm going to do is take a couple stems.
That's a great idea. So again, you took it fresh, you rolled it into a ball, placed it
into
inside
a big bowl or something
into a cylinder vase like this.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, put it inside there, and then let it dry inside there.
Exactly.
Smart.
Yeah. So we take a little bit of this, and you can clean it up a little bit. I mean, I think it's fun to have little botanical messy things, but it's sometimes hard to get people to get to that point where they're okay with perfect things.
With the guard pedal on the outside.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the birch and I'm going to do the same kind of thing that I did with the crocosmia. And it's going to actually sort of encompass the idea of this being sheltered from above now. So we have the wall, and then we're going to have this above the arrangement. And this is, I'm only going to do 3 or 4 of these stems. I don't want this to be a barrier. I want you to be able to see clearly to the arrangement itself. So I'm going to break off, and I mean, me clipping this is just out of habit. Obviously, you don't cut dried flowers with a knife, but
you're sharpening the end to go into your home.
Exactly. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go from both sides. So I'm going to do one from that side, another one from that side, and then maybe one in the center going that way, just so we have some variance. Okay, now I have I was thinking I was going to do a little bit of steel grass, which I love. It's a little bit more unique than bear grass because it's cleaner and it's uniform almost all the way up. It's the same length, same width, where bear grass is thick and then it gets skinny. It's a little harder to work with it, I think. This has just a little bit.
It's 3-sided.
It's 3-sided.
It's a triangle.
It's cool. So I'm going to take a little bit of this, poke this, and I'm basically mimicking what I've already done a few different times. And this is interesting because you don't necessarily have to make this part, perfect, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave a wrap around and let the ends kind of do their own thing at the very end. But okay, there we go.
Right.
So
they're going a couple different directions.
They kind of go in different directions. They don't have to be, you know, okay, I have to get my measuring tape and do 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches.
Right.
Do it. Whatever kind of guides the arrangement it will work. Takes a little bit of practice to get used to doing these kind of arrangements because we're used to doing a dozen rows arrangement and all this. When you do this kind of thing, it's a little haphazard, so you have to be prepared to not do it perfectly the first or 50th time. Now what I want to do is put a little bit more botanical into the sheltering element of the arrangement. So what I have is these globe yarrow. Let the arrangement hold on to the little flower like this here.
Okay.
So it's sort of creating like an aerial armature. And I'm not doing them right next to each other, but I'm doing them in miniature groups, 2, 2, and 2. So there are 5 or 6 that are going to be in the arrangement, but they're in little clusters. Instead of having dots in the arrangement, it's focused in one section. So I'm going to take another one here and poke him down. And I'm actually using the steel grass as my kind of guide to where they're going to go. And it's interesting because like an orb like this and then the grass looping next to it, and then you have these little textural things kind of coming around. It all goes together, but it's something that you may not look and say, I want those all together, but when they're styled a certain way, it works. And I think that's the best way to do an arrangement. And you know, if you like your arrangement, people will like it. And then the fiddleheads are the last thing I'm going to do. And I just think these should be in every single arrangement in the whole world. So I just added one here, and I'm using the birch as my support again.
You are. You're going into the little
crevices.
The little fork. Fork in the.
And make sure each one does get into the foam. That's really, really like this super important because otherwise they'll start to uncurl and start drying, which could be kind of interesting. But you know, for my purposes, I want them to be in the foam. And I'm going to do one on the other side. And again, this is a thicker stemmed, botanical, but I think it could, again, I don't think you're distracted by it. I think that this curl makes you see something and not the stem. So there's a lot going on here, but the reality is, when you look at it, you see something a little messy maybe, but when you look at when you go deep into the arrangement, you are seeing something that is rich and natural, and it's creative, but it's not overdone. There's not too much going on where you're confused by it.
Well, and even from this end that I have you've got this is there, but then it fades away as my eye journeys down into the center of this, and that's just so attractive. That's the beauty of it and from every single angle, from where you are, where the other person will be on the other side, where I am, the other end, this is a completely different arrangement for everybody.
I think a lot of people get in the rut of doing one-sided arrangements. They only think of things sitting on a countertop in their kitchen, and I want to, I try to let people know you can do an arrangement, pretty much get away with doing any arrangement 365 degrees. So you can look at it from any way and appreciate it for its full beauty. It doesn't have to be, if I just turned it a little bit, it would be prettier. I mean, this could be pretty from anywhere. So
it's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So, Christopher Grigas, what you wanted to see here, one of our great uBloomers, a featured uBloomer, one of our article writers, one of our people who post photographs, and also the owner of uBloom, creating beautiful designs like this. Until next week, keep having fun with flowers.